hearing, and it just underscores how the preservation of the rule of law in America must be paramount consideration to every single voter in November. The comments from Trump that we just played, they come on a day that saw the first hearing in his criminal federal election interference case in nearly a year. That's because the case has been put on hold as the Supreme Court, which includes 3 of his handpicked nominees, grappled with the question of absolute presidential immunity for presidential acts and sided with Trump, gave him more than he asked for. So that left Judge Tanya Chutkan today to hold this hearing, a status hearing is what it's called, in which she made clear she's not including the upcoming election at this point in any of her considerations about timing. Saying this, quote, "I understand there is an election pending," she said to Trump's lawyer, John Lauro. Quote, "This court is not concerned with the electoral schedule. That's nothing I'm going to consider," end quote. Judge Chutkan did not set a trial date, but moments ago she did send out a schedule for briefing due dates that runs through late October. But before all the discussions about timing, there was another piece of business that had to be dealt with at today's hearing, and that was the arraignment of Donald Trump on the 4 counts he's charged with in the special counsel's superseding indictment that came down last week. Trump pleaded not guilty. And even though he was not present at today's proceedings, we cannot ignore the fact that 2 months ahead of a presidential election, one of the 2 candidates had to be arraigned today on criminal charges having to do with his efforts to overturn the last election in which he lost. He's also awaiting sentencing on the 34 counts he was convicted of in May in the hush money election interference case. That judge, Judge Juan Merchan, already pushed the sentencing date back once, and we'll be watching to see if he pushes it back again. As for now, the ex-president is set to be sentenced in a little less than 2 weeks. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here, plus Politico national correspondent and MSNBC contributor Betsy Woodruff Swan is here. Andrew Weissman, what's so interesting in Trump's comments about Hillary Clinton is that it's not a denial of any of the crimes he's been charged with. His defense or his line is basically what it was to grabbing women between the legs. When you're president, they let you do it. What does it say that with that as his message, he's basically running neck and neck with Vice President Kamala Harris? He's farther behind her than he ever was ahead of Joe Biden. But there's still a whole bunch of people in this country that either haven't focused on this or are buying what he's selling.
Yeah, so I don't know which of the 2 it is, or whether it's kind of a combination of both of them, or whether, I mean, certainly no failing on your part, but whether the media has to make it absolutely clear that facts matter. And so when Donald Trump says, you know, I never tried to put Hillary Clinton in jail, and you need to know 2 can play that game. I haven't, but 2 could play that game. Let's just go over the facts. And here's a shout out to my colleagues on Just Security. They listed all of the ways in which Donald Trump tried to prosecute his enemies in explicit detail, including Hillary Clinton. And some people actually were investigated. Some people were actually prosecuted. But if you ask sort of what is the key distinction, facts matter. The president of the United States doesn't get to say, put this person in jail. The reason Hillary Clinton was not prosecuted is because there was no prosecutable case. The reason Andy McCabe was not prosecuted is because there was no prosecutable case. They tried. Donald Trump tried to do it. The reason that John Durham, who brought 2 charges, was not successful is because 2 separate trial juries, that's 24 people, unanimously found that he had not met the burden of proof. He could not prove his case. 24 people unanimously. Facts matter. And so the former president saying this ignores that this isn't just a question of ipsy dixit. He's saying, I can do this. He did try to do it, and he's ignoring that in the rule of law that separates our country from his beloved Russia, where we've had such devastating events happen this week in terms of what Russia is trying to do to help him become president, which he is silent on saying then denouncing, which any president or former president should be denouncing, is that's what separates us from countries like Russia, which is that we have a rule of law where facts and law matter.
Andrew Weissman, what does it say to you that the audience for the facts is almost as fractured on partisan lines as the candidates themselves? I mean, I agree with you. That's how I see the world. The Supreme Court, not so much. They believe in absolute immunity for anything that someone can claim as an official act, which is how Trump framed all of his coup activity. Activity that even John Eastman knew was both unconstitutional and illegal. Put some of that in an email, came out in testimony for the 1-6 Select Committee. And I ask you that in the spirit of Liz Cheney's rather historic endorsement of Kamala Harris today, saying that Donald Trump is such a threat to the rule of law, to democracy, and to the Constitution, to that document, that she's going to back the Democratic nominee.
So, I do not have sort of a big picture answer to the problem of that. When I grew up, there were sort of 3 news stations, and everyone talks about Walter Cronkite, and as sort of a basic consensus, not uniform, but a general consensus on the facts, and then a discussion and debate about what to do about it. What are the implications? And good faith debate. You could even have really strong views one way or the other as to what should happen. Now, obviously, that is exploded into many, many, many different avenues where people can get bite-sized pieces. I do think that one way to deal with this is that all of us who participate in the media in various ways, and I hate to sound like a broken record, need to not cover adjectives and adverbs and make sure that we are doing our homework and digging deeper for the benefit of the audience, and that a story is not by the way, I'm not personalizing. I know I'm preaching to the choir with 2 incredible professionals. I'm keeping myself out of it with the 2 of you who are on. But it's really speaking to people and where you've done your homework and you go to the ground truth and you go one layer deeper than Donald Trump today accused someone of being ugly. And this person, and that he's more handsome than the opposing candidate, and using adjectives as if it's a story and not really digging deeper into facts and making sure we cover that. Obviously, there are news organizations that will not do that, but I do think that elevating the level of discussion on air, in print, on the radio, and making sure that all of us are going deeper in our coverage is a service we can help provide. And I know that's not a panacea, but at least it's something to try to get people to grapple with actual facts. And, maybe just final point is, I'm a longtime DOJ trial lawyer. And I have to say, you end up, I think when you talk to all trial lawyers, we have deep faith in jurors, and we've seen jurors of all political stripes and types and persuasions really rise to the occasion and act out of principle. And I think most people in that setting really try to do that. And I feel like that is something that we have to try and emulate in a broader context than just a courtroom.
It's an interesting sort of segue to the reporting on this. I mean, Betsy, you're steeped in the facts of this case, and the facts have never been in a lot of dispute. They've become more, we've had more of them, right? He plans his coup in full view. He goes to the ellipse. But we learned from Cassidy Hutchinson, a senior White House official, that he wanted to take down the effing mags, let my people in, they're not here to hurt me. So the reporting and the public acts were enhanced by the congressional investigation. And then, of course, the crimes that the federal government charged Donald Trump with in the indictment probably revealed more than any. And the witnesses aren't people like Andrew or me or you. They're Mike Pence. They're the lifetime White House people. All that stipulated Trump has made fools of his base by somehow painting this prosecution as political in nature. It feels like that could all blow up in his face. CNN is reporting this hour that evidence in the January 6th case against Trump could be released before the election under this new schedule just announced in the last hour. Let me read from what they're reporting. Quote, Judge Tanya Chutkan has set a schedule in the federal election subversion case against former President Trump that will allow prosecutors to release never-before-seen evidence, such as grand jury transcripts ahead of the presidential election. Some of those individuals, like Mike Pence, could be the ones providing the evidence. This is not what they plan for or what they want. And this would indeed represent new information before the voters ahead of the election.
In fact, this is the opposite of what Trump's team wanted. Today in court, John Lauro, one of Trump's top defense attorneys, specifically said that one thing they were hoping for was that surprising or interesting new information about what happened around the time that Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election results would stay under wraps because it could have an impact on the election. Judge Chutkan soundly rejected that argument and said, actually, we're doing the opposite. We're going to proceed as if this election wasn't happening. She basically said, it's not my problem that your guy's running for president. And then in this scheduling order that just came out within the last hour or so, she includes deadlines that lead up to even November 7th, 2 days after Election Day. The deadline for the Justice Department to file a very important motion showing some of the evidence they have to demonstrate that Trump was acting in his personal capacity when he committed the crimes they alleged in the superseding indictment. The deadline for them to file that motion is September 26th. Now, it'll be filed under seal. The judge is going to be able to determine when the seal would be lifted, but she's made clear in very explicit terms that she's not going to make that determination based on any electoral consequences. She's very much moving forward independent of the political process, uninfluenced by the political process. Trump can complain as much as he wants about federal prosecutors being infected by political calculations, but this is a judge who's saying politics is very far away from the decisions that I'm making. Nicolle, January 6th is one of the most investigated events ever. I think we can all agree on that in terms of the amount of information that's been made available. But what we can now expect is that perhaps even more material that is not yet public could come to the public eye in the weeks before Election Day. And if I could just add one thing on the point that Andrew was making about media literacy and the environment that we live in. Arguably, in one way, this is the golden era for media consumption. The amount of journalism that is available on the internet to anyone with a laptop or a smartphone for free, the amount, the breadth, the quality is just staggering. You could spend all day, every day reading high quality journalism and not get through all of the fascinating material that's published. But one thing that I think is really important is that people who are trying to keep track of these cases both read high quality analysis, but also read the underlying court documents. This scheduling order that we're talking about, it's available for free online. Media outlets reporting on it, including particularly Politico, always link to these court documents so people can see them for themselves and really try to get a sense of all the details, all the information that in prior decades would not have been readily available.
Betsy, let me ask you this. Trump is admitting in recent interviews that he lost the election and that it's his right to interfere. I mean, that's basically his argument before the Supreme Court, that those were official acts. Is that part of his defense in the federal case, or is that part of his plan for 2024?
It's a good question. I have not heard him emphasizing the fact that he lost the 2020